Good afternoon, Niner faithful. Welcome back again. Second live stream of the day. Just in case you've missed me, it's only been about 100 minutes since I was last on. Had a fantastic episode where we brought on an Atlanta Falcons expert, a little bit of inside information on Rob Schuh's channel. Now we're flipping it back to the other side of the script. We are bringing in a special guest in his own right, Brad Graham from the SF Niners. Brad, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Rob. I appreciate you having me, man. And I'm really excited to kind of preview the Atlanta Falcons that are coming into town here on Sunday.
Yes, it is scheduled to be an exciting matchup. I think some of the 49er faithful may be overlooking this game, but I am not. I take this one very seriously. I think that the 49ers must play each week as if it is a playoff game going forward. The playoff seeding is very important. The momentum is very important. And San Francisco continuing to develop their offense and play complementary defense is critical in my book to setting up for any type of run in January, which I know we're all hoping for.
Right. Absolutely. And to your point, we just cannot take this Atlanta Falcons teams lightly in any sense because we understand, just like you alluded to, it's essentially treat every game as a one game playoff because with, going into this game, Atlanta's only one game behind the 49ers right now. And we know that with how this team has performing this year, it's been an up and down ride. So we just have to ensure that with focusing on the Falcons, that they bring the right energy and they bring all the momentum they can.
Yes. Uncle Mo is staying in San Francisco at the moment. Let's hope he stays through the week. Got to celebrate right now. We're doing a video call-in show later on the channel, Brad, and we have it for members only. We just got a new member of the channel,
Nice.
Silent Seth, coming in as a sneakerhead member of the YouTube channel. Got to do the play on the last name, Rob Schuh. So hopefully he'll be able to join tonight. A video call-in show happening at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Well, you mentioned it, and it's a great lead in to our first topic here, just how serious Atlanta will be taking this game, and therefore dictating the 49ers do so as well. Let me read off this statistic for you of Atlanta's playoff chances. This is according to 538.com's playoff prediction model. It gives the Falcons, who are currently sitting at 6-7, a 12% chance of making the playoffs. As of this week, 12%. If they are able to beat our San Francisco 49ers on Sunday, that number jumps up to 43% with that win. They come almost to a coin flip of getting into the playoffs. It shows the important, if the Falcons lose it, they will have no better than a 27% chance to make the playoffs going forward, despite any wins they may have in the final three games. So this one sets up for Atlanta in their need to run the table to win the four remaining games if they have any chance at getting into the playoffs. Clearly, they're going to come in with some motivation. Brad, what's your overall impression of this Atlanta team and where they are with regard to how they started this season?
It's been an up and down ride for Atlanta. Obviously, they've been dealing with a lot of injuries. They've lost key contributors at key positions, obviously at wideout. We know that Julio Jones was clearly traded this year, and they're going to be without their star wideout and Calvin Ridley. And so they've been kind of having to make some things work. Luckily for them, they've been able to find a little bit of a diamond in the rough in Cordell Patterson, and the way he's been able to be used kind of similarly to like we've seen from Deebo Samuel with the 49ers as, more of an offensive weapon,
Right.
can rush and be able to be utilized as a wide receiver as well. So they've been able to kind of shift some things around by just having to, and they've been somewhat successful, winning 6 games. I would say they've been better than what I would anticipate them being based on the current roster.
You think overall record has been a little bit better than what their roster may show as far as a talented, deep team? That seems fitting. And quite honestly, if you took the Atlanta Falcons from the start of the season and we were playing them earlier in the year, I don't know that I would have the same level of concern. They were a wildly inconsistent team to begin.
Mm-hmm.
They got absolutely destroyed by Dallas. And I think that was the precipice of people believing that, well, this became an easy game for the San Francisco 49ers. And 49er faithful may be ignoring the trend that is occurring over the last several weeks, now having won 2 in a row, coming fresh off of that victory over Carolina with a resurging defense, a defense that has struggled a little bit against the run, which sets up nicely for the 49ers. They have certainly struggled in getting after the passer. They've got Dante Fowler on defense with 4.5 sacks. Beyond that, no one has more than 2. It really sets up to where they can't get too much pressure on opposing offenses. But they're showing just enough with Matt Ryan there, with the emergence of Kyle Pitts, with Russell Gage on the outside having a pretty good game against Carolina. They set up, in my mind, to be on the cusp of a playoff caliber team. I'm not confident that they can make a run to finish out this year, but I'm not willing to count them out just yet either.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to kind of differentiate what we see on paper versus what they're actually producing out on the field, because we also know these are humans. And at the end of the day, they want it just as bad as we do. And with the Atlanta Falcons only being 1 game behind the 49ers, what better way to travel across country and be the spoiler to what the 49ers have been trying to accomplish? It's been a really up and down year for the 49ers, obviously. But for the Falcons, they're kind of playing with house money in a sense, which kind of makes them a bit dangerous because
Yes.
no one really expects much from them. And that's where you can find yourself, in the middle between a rock and a hard place, because you get a team coming in that's hungry, that's ready to step up to the challenge. And the biggest thing with the 49ers is that they don't step down, because if we look at on paper, I feel confident saying the 49ers are the more talented team,
Yes.
even with the injuries at multiple positions. However, you can't discount the human element and just those guys being motivated and hungry because you also have to take a step back a little bit and look at the Atlanta Falcons since Kyle Shanahan has left. It's been a rocky road for those guys.
It
And
has.
they've played spoiler to us back in 2019, if you remember, when they came to Levi's and on our magical run to the Super Bowl, they made it real ugly for us there for a second.
I remember
So,
vividly Julio Jones and that catch in the end zone to end that game. Still a dagger in my heart.
yep. Absolutely. So I could imagine that same sense coming in. Obviously, they have more to play for this year than just to spoil the 49ers fun and the year that they were having. This time around, they're vying for a playoff spot. It would mean a lot to the franchise, would mean a ton to the fan base, and I'm sure the players. So I guarantee they're going to be motivated and ready to go against the 49ers.
Yes, I think so as well. This sets up as a type of revenge game coming back against their previous offensive coordinator. Matt Ryan certainly enjoys playing against Kyle Shanahan. He indicated as much in that 2019 game. And to your point, that is exactly the type of trap game that the 49ers need to avoid this week, is allowing a very dangerous Atlanta Falcons team to come in. You said it. They have people don't expect them to win. They're playing with house money, and that does give an edge. Throughout the week, you can have that added motivation of whatever the press clippings are that give Atlanta no shot, right? You put up all of the experts picking the 49ers, the spread favoring the 49ers, and that's all added motivation coming into this. Continuing along the same vein, The 49ers have really struggled coming off of East Coast start games, which is interesting. Most teams going out to the East Coast, significant travel, typically an earlier start, although with Cincinnati this past week, obviously got flexed into the 1:25 time slot. But typically you're starting early, you're traveling out to the East Coast. For the San Francisco 49ers, East Coast games are a long way to go. Most people drop those East Coast games, not the San Francisco 49ers. No, we are quite good in the Eastern time zone. But then somehow on our way back out west, back out to Levi's, we lose that edge and have dropped a considerable percentage of those games coming back from the Eastern time zone. We just talked about a desperate Atlanta team. How do you think the 49ers avoid the trap of a slow start in this one?
It's really going to come down to, at least from what I feel, it's going to the leaders in that locker room. Again, the coaching staff is going to harp the same points, the same information, the same rallying cries. That's not going to change. But I really think it's up to the leaders inside that locker room. Trent Williams, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Fred Warner, emerging leaders like Azeez Al-Shaair, guys to just really hit home that, like we talked about in the opening, we got to, if we're in that locker room and we're speaking to each other as if we were players, we have to treat this as it is a playoff game. We cannot take them lightly. I like to try to put myself in those positions to try to see how they would think about it.
Absolutely.
And I just really think when it comes to it, it's an energy thing. They know, like we talked about, on paper, everything looks good. The projections and everything going into it, the money line, oh, it looks great. Oh, the 49ers should win this. At the end of the day, it comes down to energy. And we've seen the 49ers and how they performed at home. They're 1-4 on the year at home. I was in attendance for the Green Bay game week 3. I saw a raucous stadium get completely quieted almost right away. And I think those types of situations they want to avoid. If they can come out, get an early start, get the energy up, get Levi Stadium going and feed off that energy and just kind of compound good play after good play, I think that's going to be the best case scenario for them. We understand that when the 49ers kind of get behind the 8 ball a little bit, it can be a little hairy trying to get back into it at
Yes, it
times,
can.
especially at home.
The 49ers are not really built to come from behind. I do think that getting out to a quick start in this one, not allowing Atlanta's energy coming in to dictate the early pace of the game, is extremely important. You touched on Levi's Stadium. It has not been the home field advantage that the 49ers would want it to be. Now, that trend is continuing throughout the NFL. I can't really place it as to why home field advantage seems to be disappearing for football teams. It was clear in 2020, but you would have thought it would have been a resurgence of home field advantage coming into 2021. Potentially, people are still just a little bit awkward in the post-COVID era. But to Paul's comment here, there are nosebleed seats available for $43. This is my plea to the 49er faithful. If you are anywhere near Santa Clara and enjoy 49er football, get yourself a discounted seat and go early. Get there in the stands and be loud. We need a ruckus environment for the San Francisco 49ers at home against Atlanta. And if we're not careful, it could fill up with whatever sparse Atlanta Falcons fans are hiding in the Bay Area because the deals are just too good to pass up, that they get to see their home team for a discounted rate. So yes, I believe that 49er faithful must spend their good hard-earned dollars to get themselves out to Levi's Stadium to try and protect that home field advantage. And I'm going to tee off of Jan's comment here in agreement that the way in which this team is built, in acknowledging that they're not a come-from-behind team, they must play complementary football. I'm looking for Kyle Shanahan and a creative run game plan to come out and take advantage of a somewhat suspect Atlanta defense when it comes to stopping the run. If we can get the big men going on the offensive line and control the time of possession and really just shift the momentum clearly to the 49ers, allow the defense to do what they do best, which is come in, limited snaps, get off the field quickly, get after the quarterback. That to me sets up to be the right recipe for success. I just worry if they come out flat, Atlanta could try and jump on them early, and then this thing becomes a crapshoot.
Absolutely. And I agree. I think it does absolutely start with the trenches. And I think that's been the theme for the year in 2021, because obviously we understand that when Raheem Mostert went down in, week 1 against Detroit, we knew the offense would be significantly different from there on out, and have been trying to overcome that with, running backs like Elijah Mitchell, um, Jermichael Hasty, and Jeff Wilson, who have done a pretty serviceable job, and specifically Elijah Mitchell, who's been very productive as a rookie for a 6th-round draft pick. So he's been phenomenal, but it does start up front with the big guys and being able to create the running lanes for the running backs to be able to hit, read, and do all those kinds of things. Going into this game, the 49ers are going to be facing another pretty stout interior defensive lineman in Grady Jarrett. If you've noticed and you've watched on tape, this unit can particularly be hampered at times due to stout, short, strong, fast interior defensive lineman. Kenny Clark comes to mind
Yes.
for the Green Bay Packers when I think of that game. Going back to last week with Puna Ford, you can see that those guys can create a little bit of a matchup issue based on their kind of stature, strength, and speed. So it's going to be imperative for those guys to get bodies moving, but we understand running behind the left side with Trent Williams, Laken Tomlinson, you throw Kittle and Warner out there,
Goodness gracious.
you start motioning Juice or whoever you want to out there. They have shown a recipe for success. Now it's going to be, what are the counters off of that? Because one of the things that we're identifying on tape is that teams are getting smart. They're cluing in on what these plays are doing, these outside counters, these potential pitches to the outside that have been successful for us in the past. We're starting to see them load the box a little more, do those types of things. So I think a big part of it is obviously starts with the game, the trenches up front. But it's going to be interesting to see what the scheme looks like to be able to, scheme some runs open. They've been kind of transitioning to more of this kind of gap scheme and more kind of away from the outside zone that we've been so accustomed to.
Right.
And so it's going to be very interesting, especially against a 3-4 defense, to see how all that works out come Sunday.
Do you see that primarily as a function of losing Raheem Mostert, that he was truly the player that got the engine to go for the 49ers, and that when we lost him for the year, we lost a certain percentage of the playbook that was designed specifically for his top end speed?
100%. And I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing more gap scheme, more kind of power style runs. I think that was in the cards when they drafted Trey Lance. And, we've seen him against Arizona and some of the running plays that they had with him, which are more power themed. However, Raheem Mostert was one of the main reasons why the outside zone was so insanely good. I'm admittedly one of, Raheem's, biggest fans. I'm a big fan of his ability. One of the things that I talk about all the time is it's like, I liken it to driving a stick shift and being able to either like ride in first gear and be able to set up his blocks, see the lanes, and when he sees it, he has the ability just to drop down and punch it and hit the hole with perfect timing. And that's something that we miss. Something that even though Elijah Mitchell has been productive, we are seeing on tape that he is, he's still developing as a runner. He's still developing behind this offensive line, understanding the movement and the flow of the zone. So that takes time. And we know with Raheem Mostert, it took him quite a few years in the league before he really got up to speed as a running back. So I think the 49ers absolutely miss Raheem Mostert, that big playability. And again, the biggest thing that I think they're missing is his vision. His ability, and the vision combined with the start and go speed, the ability to kind of ride in that neutral first, and then when the hole opens, just hitting it at full speed, one cut and he's gone. I think they miss that so much, and I think it's a huge reason why we are seeing more powers, counters, traps than we've seen even at the beginning of the year. You've seen the progression and how they've slowly transitioned their offense. It's been pretty remarkable to watch.
It really is. And I love, as a car guy, I love the car analogy for Raheem Mostert. Fans are interested to know who's going to be the RB1 on Sunday. Is Mitchell going to be back? Wouldn't hate for him to get a little bit more rest so he's fresh down the stretch. Is Mitchell active? And I think that is still being decided. I was quite frankly surprised that, given the way it played out last week, where he came back into the game against Seattle and then Monday reported just headache symptoms and fell into concussion protocol. Given that set of circumstances, I didn't pay any mind to the knee issue they listed as well. I probably should have. I thought he would be active by the time we got around to Sunday's game against Cincy. And I figured as soon as we got into this week that we would see him at least limited on the practice reports. I admittedly have not seen the practice report that has come out today, if it has already been released, but I think it is still undecided at this point whether he'll be playing.
He was listed today as being off to the side, so working off to the side, as you know. So it's like one step closer to limited. So if we get that limited on Friday, I think we'll feel a little bit better.
Yes, we would. Back to the idea of encouraging fans to be out there, make the believers, saying who all is going to be at the game with me. I hope you guys make the effort to get out to Levi's Stadium. We need that home field advantage. It is going to be big for the 49ers coming into this one. All right, flipping the script to the other side of the ball. The San Francisco 49ers defense against the Atlanta Falcons. I don't think you can call them high-powered offense, but talented offense. Certainly a good quarterback with Matt Ryan in the backfield there. Clearly, the weakness of the 49ers defense is their paper-thin secondary unit. Against the Bengals, it felt like defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans was able to effectively hide that secondary with great pressure from the front four and a series of very well-timed and executed blitzes. He seemed to have just enough in his holster to pull one out in overtime where Bosa came through in the clutch. If he was able to do that against a three-headed monster like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd, will DeMeco Ryans be able to do that again against Matt Ryan and company, in your opinion?
I do think so. I think DeMeco Ryans has had a phenomenal year. I know there's been a lot of up and down conversations about what he's been able to do for the 49ers this year, but in his rookie year as a defensive coordinator, the way he makes adjustments, and because we understand that losing Jason Verrett week one, terrible. You're automatically backpedaling in that regard to having to make adjustments.
Absolutely.
D Ford not being available for the majority of the year, as we've heard, he's done for the year. He won't be coming back. Losing Javon Kinlaw, that is tough,
Oof.
especially when we understand what the 49ers are trying to execute with their defensive line and how important it is to the overall success of the defense. So DeMeco Ryans has done a phenomenal job this year, in my opinion. And I think his best game and best showing was the Bengals, to be able to showcase how when I believe the Bengals have an elite wide receiver core. When you look at Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd, I put lots of respect on Tyler Boyd. I think those guys are phenomenal wide receivers. And considering that the 49ers put out Ambry Thomas and Josh Norman as your starting cornerbacks on the outside, And they were able, now we understand Jamar Chase came away with 2 touchdowns and was able to produce, same with T. Higgins. But I felt like a large part of that started to happen when Azeez Al-Shaair went down, and again, was a
Yes.
big point of emphasis to how they were running their cover 2 sets and just taking away the middle of the field and being able to kind of hide your cornerbacks closer in the flats and things like that. As long as they're just executing their technique, they could theoretically stay out of the way more often than not. So I think D'Amico Ryans has done a fantastic job with what he did with the Bengals, but how you transition that into what they're doing with the Falcons, I think you might be able to get away from a little bit more cover two, maybe get into more single high situations, bring Jimmy
I thought
Ward
that
down,
myself.
put him on Kyle Pitts, because we understand Jimmy Ward is literally the tight end eraser,
Yes,
and
he is.
Kyle Pitts would be a great test for him. From what I know from Jimmy Ward, I know he wants that matchup too.
Oh, you know he
So
does.
he's like, he sees it, he's foaming at the mouth because it's just another notch in his cap. So I think there could be an opportunity where they load more in the box to try and take away Patterson in the run game. You can get a little bit more into some single coverage stuff, likely because you're working with guys like Tajay Sharp and a couple other like Zacharias, who are skilled wide receivers. I want to give them their credit. They just don't have the cachet behind their name as some others. But I think
No.
there's an opportunity where if you can limit Cordell Patterson and you can clamp Kyle Pitts, just like we've seen with how teams play against the 49ers. What's the name of the game? Take away the middle of the field from Jimmy Garoppolo. Things like
Exactly.
that. You take away their bread and butter, then you force them into situations where they're not comfortable or having to go outside of what they want to do. I think that's the best way to get them out of sorts.
Yeah, it sets up. Initially, my concern is immediately the corners, right? The edges, because obviously, if you're going to go into another game starting Josh Norman and Ambry Thomas, or if Dante Johnson is going to be back from losing his mother and mourning her and be back on the field, you immediately look to that as a potential for Atlanta taking advantage. And I just don't really see Atlanta stacking up well in that regard. Tajay Sharp could be interesting. Certainly, T. Higgins did a number against the 49ers last week in being able to catch balls above the defenders. And you've got another 6'4" frame in Sharp. So that height may give them a little bit of an advantage. But the other threat, Russell Gage, as I found out this morning on my Insider podcast, bringing in a Atlanta Falcons expert, that he's operating primarily out of the slot. So that gives me comfort that you're going to have K'Wan Williams matched up on him for the vast majority of the game. And I have faith in the Sharks' ability to take away that opportunity and their leading target as a wide receiver. I do think Cordell Patterson is probably the most interesting threat. A Deebo Samuel light, used less creatively than Deebo is, but having a very productive year and being a large percentage of Atlanta's offense. We'll get into the Jimmy Ward versus Kyle Pitts matchup in our next topic, so I won't hit that too hard, but I'm with you 1,000%. Jimmy does not get the credit he deserves for his ability to take out those tight ends. And he's proud of it. If you ever watch him on Instagram, on his stories, man, he will tell you about his ability to erase those tight ends. So in looking at it, to me, one of the interesting matchups for the 49ers is attacking the head of the beast, is going straight at Matt Ryan and specifically targeting them from the right side of their offensive line. Do you think that that's the key for the 49ers in moving Bosa around and sacking Matt Ryan, would be attacking the weakness opposite of their strength at left tackle there for Atlanta?
Absolutely. If you can neutralize the run game and getting them passing more than they want to, one of the things that I really, really love what Chris Korsek is doing with his defensive line rotation, obviously, because they're having to make adjustments with the personnel. They have been putting Arden Key and Charles Omenihu over the guards.
Yes.
And as a former offensive lineman myself, as a guard, and center, I understand that playing on the edges is a much different world than
Mm,
playing just on the interior. So when you actually take edge guys that have immense length, size, and speed, and you put them over guards, it's an instant matchup mismatch, because guards, they're squattier bodies. They're used to dealing with bigger defensive tackles and
working
things
in
like that.
close, right?
Exactly. And when you get guys with like elite hand skills, they're clubbing and they're ripping and they're doing spin moves, it kind of can put guards in a blender a bit. And when you got a rookie left guard in Jalen Mayfield, who is a converted tackle from Michigan, but he's okay. Like I scouted Jalen coming out. He was a decent prospect. And I think that's a mismatch they can absolutely take advantage of. Is so they can keep limiting the Falcons offense to third and longs, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8. If they can keep them in that range, and then you just unleash Bosa, Bosa's going to do work
Oh,
regardless,
you
but
know it. You know it.
absolutely. But the quickest way to get a quarterback uh jittery is interior pressure. So if you can get pressure right up the middle right away, get them flowing outside the pocket towards a Bosa, towards a Samson Ebukam, then there's an opportunity where this defensive line can really create a lot of havoc. But I do want to see what Arden Key and Charles Omenahue's impact will be like, because I feel like each game it kind of is taking a step further in its development. So I'm actually really excited to see how that plays out. So coming back to it, if they can limit the run, getting this Falcons offense in 3rd and long situations, I think this team has an opportunity to rack up some sack numbers here.
I love it. I am specifically going to be watching that left guard position. Again, insider information from the previous podcast, an Atlanta insider pointing out that indeed Mayfield could be the weak link along that offensive line. And then Caleb McGarry over there at right tackle. I would look to see Bosa playing that left defensive end more frequently in this one to match him up against Caleb McGarry, and then potentially Eric Armstead over top of Jalen Mayfield. It'd be interesting to see who matches up against those weaknesses for Atlanta. And it strikes me that that is the most surefire way for the 49ers to match up well against that Atlanta offense. One of the key members of the 49ers defense that will play a big role, we already touched on it, but it is Jimmy Ward. And this is my take. Jimmy Ward is an excellent safety that does not get the national recognition he deserves. And it's mainly because he doesn't get the big splash plays. A lack of interceptions, lack of forced fumbles, or a lack of opportunities to rush the quarterback have really left him without that national acclaim. But one thing he's very proud of, talked about him shooting his shots on Instagram. You can hear him talk about it. One thing he does very well is blanket tight ends in coverage. Do you see this matching up to where Jimmy will most likely shadow Kyle Pitts throughout this game?
I could absolutely see that. And I actually had a really fun time speaking with Jimmy Ward, because when that whole situation was going down and he started making Bleacher Report and started making headlines, he went on a live and he added me on. And so we were talking about tight ends, and he was just beside himself about how no tight end can beat him. We were talking about Waller. We were talking about all these different guys. But when we were talking about Waller, I look at Waller of having kind of a similar skill set to what Kyle Pitts has. They're essentially huge wide receivers that function as tight ends, but they have this immense skill set of being able to win in space, being able to win over the top, contested catch gods, all those types of things. So what we were talking about was how he goes about facing those tight ends, what he's trying to do in regards to mirroring technique and clamp, like essentially shooting hands and doing all those kinds of things. So Jimmy Ward is going to be ready for this matchup if that is the case. And I could also see him lobbying to D'Amico Ryans, hey, let me get a couple one-on-ones here. Let me take the young kid, the young GOAT, as everyone's crowning him, and let me see what I can do. And I really think that energy too would serve the defense well. So I would like to see it. We could see a situation where they treat Kyle Pitts in more of kind of a bracketed situation, playing underneath defender over the top and just kind of track him in that regard. So it's going to be interesting, but I would pay money to watch Kyle Pitts versus Jimmy Ward one-on-one for an entire afternoon.
Amen to that. I've been very impressed with Kyle Pitts. And admittedly, I was enamored with him coming into the draft. I wrote what was, intended to be a lighthearted article about the logical argument for drafting Kyle Pitts at 3, even after we had traded up.
Right.
Now, I didn't legitimately think the 49ers would do that. Before the draft, I correctly predicted that it would, in fact, be Trey Lance. I just saw too much upside there, and clearly the 49ers were going after a quarterback. But it was fun to talk about. You heard Peter Schrager bringing it up that, well, maybe Kyle Shanahan is playing 4D chess. Could you just imagine the setup with George Kittle and Kyle Pitts as your 2 tight ends? And he has lived up to those expectations, even on an underperforming Atlanta team. I mean, 54 receptions on 88 targets for 770 yards with a 14.3 yard average, by far the deepest average for the team. So clearly he is more of their deep threat. But much like George Kittle early on in his career, he's not the red zone target that you would think. Given his wingspan and ability to bring down the 50-50 ball, you would think he would be a primary target in the red zone, but only 1 touchdown so far in his young career. Hopefully that trend continues.
Saw something
I have to
similar
believe
with Julio Jones throughout his career too in Atlanta.
Yes. That is an interesting trend, one that preceded Kyle Shanahan being there and has stuck around after his time as offensive coordinator. It strikes me, if Jimmy Ward is able to win this matchup and effectively take away what is their deep threat, that sets up for the 49ers defense to then be able to play the middle and the run in the way that they need to focus on Cordarrelle Patterson and really get after Matt Ryan. I mean, I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that this matchup of Jimmy versus Pitts could decide this game. That if Jimmy can blanket Kyle Pitts, the entirety of it, and limit him in the way he does, I mean, what is his claim? That if you're not an elite tight end, he's going to hold you below 40 yards? If he keeps Kyle Pitts below 40, we're good. We are good, baby.
Absolutely. If the 49ers defense and or Jimmy Ward can clamp Kyle Pitts for less than 40, that's a good sign, because I think the fan base, I think the defense in general would feel comfortable with trying to get beat by a Tajay Sharp, trying to get beat by a Mike Davis or a Russell Gage or a Zacharias. One of these guys, they would feel much better. And again, if you only have 2 weapons to really neutralize Kyle Pitts and Cordarrelle Patterson, if they can do that and be successful, then that puts the Falcons in the scramble mode of, all right, how do we manufacture yards? How do we manufacture first downs? Because they're going to have to lean on guys like Zacharias and Gage to pick up the slack. And, if we're looking at that from purely a schematic standpoint, that's what we want. That's what we're looking for. We don't want to get beat by the guys that we know can beat us. If we can clamp them down, then the 49ers are going to be in good shape.
Yeah, force someone to step up that has historically not stepped up and is a much cleaner matchup for the 49ers on the outside. That sets up pretty nicely. Hey, Jimmy was on IG this morning talking more of his trash, but it wasn't about himself. He was replaying Kowalski's big hit on Joe Mixon, talking about Joe Mixon. Who?
Joe Did he Mixon, do a live?
Who? It's great.
Did he do a live on IG?
No, just in his stories. It's still there. You can go find it now.
I'm gonna have to
Gotta
go check
love
that
it.
out.
When Jimmy gets fired up and starts talking his trash, man, that's near and dear to my heart.
It's so good. I love it too. When we get Jimmy Ward going, it's a good sign.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Speaking of getting things going, for the 49ers offense, it is all about the trenches. The 49ers are a run first team, in my humble opinion. That is our identity. We refound that identity recently, and it has changed the shape and course of this season for the better. Trent Williams had his premiere for the documentary Silverback, which I'm very excited to watch. I hear it is phenomenal. I hear that his work ethic is jaw-dropping, which you can understand given the results on the field. It makes you feel a hell of a lot better about giving such an enormous contract to an aging offensive lineman, and he is proving worth every freaking penny of it in the 2021 season. You yourself are a retired offensive lineman. It seemed too perfect not to spend a moment going over the 49ers offensive line and getting your thoughts. Brad, would you be willing to speak just a little bit about your observations around Trent Williams and just how special this season's been so far for him?
This year has been so much fun. I tweet about it constantly. I liken to studying Trent Williams as what it's like watching Steph Curry with the basketball. It's
Ooh,
just
good
one of those.
comparison.
It's one of those things when you're watching it, you're watching something different. You're watching something you've never seen before. You're watching greatness day in and day out. And so every time that I pull up to the tape and I start studying the All 22, I'm just the happiest little clam that could be in existence because I get to watch Trent Williams completely demolish people, not just through, like, again, people think of offensive line, they think of, demolishing people in the sense of just pure grown man strength versus grown man strength. Trent is doing it at a technical level that we have never seen. One of my favorite things about Trent Williams is he's kind of incorporated defensive line moves into the way he operates his technique, because
Interesting.
I legitimately went into this year, I do tons of scouting pre-draft and all that stuff, and just the trends that I see are these defensive linemen are so good at taking away hands. We see the clubs, we see the rips, we see the swipes, we see how these defensive linemen continuously beat O linemen, and a big part of it is taking away hands and leverage. So what Trent has done is he's adopted those same techniques. One of the techniques you'll see on probably 50% to 75% of his backside run plays, he is doing a left-handed cross chop snatch move where I'm sure you guys have seen it, where these guys are falling on their faces when it looks like he's barely doing anything. And all it is a manipulation of that person's leverage against them. Because the simple concept is the D-line is trying to engage to then initiate their moves. He's baiting them into engaging, and then he's chopping their hands, grabbing the top and throwing them down. That's why they just flip and fly. You're like, how did he just throw a 350-pound man to the dirt like a feather? Like, how does that happen? He has learned
Leverage.
how to manipulate leverage, and he's doing it at a level that no one has ever seen before. And it's been absolutely beautiful to watch.
It's unbelievable. And I mean, they are limiting offensive linemen, right? I mean, the NFL wants excitement. The NFL wants splash plays. And therefore, they create rules that prohibit people from limiting those splash plays. And one splash play is sacking the quarterback. And so they want to eliminate holding by the offensive lineman. They have certainly limited where offensive linemen are able to work their hands. So to watch someone be such a technician in the way that Trent Williams is, it's so phenomenal. Someone pointed out earlier that he is the Nick Bosa of the offensive line. It might be the other way around if you're asking me, that Nick Bosa is the Trent Williams of the defensive line, because I think that Trent Williams is having potentially the best season of a left tackle that I've ever seen. I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say that he is the best left tackle in the league right now. Is that a fair statement?
I don't think it's a stretch to say he's the best player in the NFL right now. Again, we understand, a lot of emphasis goes to the quarterback. The quarterback is the most position in football, gets all the eyes on them. But understanding what I know about offensive line play, again, you compare him to guys like Tyron Smith, left tackle for the Cowboys. He's running circles around him right now. So when you see a guy that dominant at a position that is arguably won't call it as important as the quarterback, because I think the quarterback position is probably the most important position in sports in regards to an entire team.
Right.
But the left tackle's right there, because you gotta guard the guy. And we understand with the Khalil Macks, the TJ Watts, these edge rushers, the guys like Micah Parsons, these edge rushers are aliens.
They're elite.
They are just freaks. And being on an island, moving backwards, having to block those guys while they're throwing 400 different moves at you and setting you up, that's really difficult. And so with what Trent Williams is doing, I really believe he's probably the best player in the NFL right now.
That's phenomenal. And when I watch his feet, for the size man that he is, it just boggles my mind. I mean, honestly, it is so hard to fathom the quick steps that he takes, the way in which he regains his balance so quickly and maintains leverage throughout the entirety of it. Nick asking a good question here. Is this an iron sharpens iron thing with Nick Bosa? As an ex-NFL, as an ex-lineman yourself, would you say that going up against someone as talented as Nick is on the other side, or for Nick going up against Trent on the offensive side, is that just making both of these guys even more elite?
100%, because everything that I know about Nick Bosa and how technical he is, again, he is one of the reasons why I went into this year with the thought process of how do you eliminate these defensive linemen taking away your hands, because of Nick. And that's what he does. Nick talks about it all the time. When an offensive lineman shoots their hands, he's always trying to aim for their wrist. So if you
Yes.
grab their wrist before they strike, they have lost any leverage that they would hope to have. And so when you do that, you just throw them to the side, you hit them you can bull rush them right onto their backs. Like you can do, when you take away an offensive lineman's hands, I mean, that's our bread and butter. So you take that away, it makes their job really difficult. And I absolutely believe in my heart that those two practicing against each other, I guarantee they've sat across from each other. And he's like, man, all right, so I see you taking away my hands.
Right?
How do I take away your hand? How do I take away you from taking away my? I guarantee you they have had those conversations, because what we see on tape, it matches that. I've seen countless times Trent baiting defensive ends with his hands. So what he'll do is he'll throw his hands up. Then you see the D lineman, that's their cue or their key. So then they start their pass rush move. He will literally do a swim move and grab them on the top and throw them on the ground. It's next level. It is
That's
next level.
unfair.
Yeah,
Unfair.
it's
That's
next
like
level.
matrix moves, because you know what's happening, and the game has slowed down for you to such an extent that you can set someone up for a secondary move and have a third move that comes into play if they have a good response for it. That's wild. So quick pick here. Is Trent Williams going to end up in the top 10 of the NFL's best 100 players this year?
I hope he's top 3.
He's got to be, right?
He has to be. I mean, he's finally picking up some steam with the PFF gradings. Those always help, because I think we all understand that evaluating offensive line is very hard. I recognize that as someone who played. The only reason I know how to evaluate offensive line is because I played. So I would imagine it would be very, very difficult for anyone who didn't play, and because there's so many small nuances, and everything in there is technique, even though it just looks like two big fat people running into each other over and over again. But everything they do is dripping with technique. They're all counters. It's all setups for the next move. So he's just playing absolutely phenomenal. And you talked about the Silverback documentary that he had. I had the opportunity to go to that event and watch the documentary, and there's no surprise why Trent Williams is playing at the level he is. I mean,
that is very cool.
when they got into the topic of, him fighting his cancer, he made multiple Pro Bowls with
Right.
cancer,
Right.
and he didn't know about it based
Wow.
on kind of malpractice from team doctors with Washington. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Ugh.
Um,
What a train wreck
and
of an organization.
yeah, but to just without showing you the visual, he literally had probably 3/4 of his like skin on a sculpt removed. They had to, like, it was insane
Whoa.
to
Man.
see what they actually had to do, and then to be able to see his transformation of just how he now attacks his life, how he goes about his business, because he stared death in the face.
Mm.
He was told he wasn't going to live past a certain age. He was told he's
Wow.
never going to play football again. So when you conceptualize the talent, and then you understand what he has went through, and now what he is doing past that point, there is zero surprise why he is playing the best football of his career in his heading into his mid 30s. It's because he attacks everything he does like it's his last. He talked about
Mm.
how he's like, when everyone's asleep, I'm in the gym at 3:30 in the morning working out,
I read
because
that. He has workouts
it gives me an
regularly between 2 and 4 a.m.
he's like, it gives me an extra leg on the competition.
Yes, it
And it's
does.
just like, I'm like, dude, you're built different. You're built
Yeah.
different.
Real different. Real different. I mean, just a special individual. I have to agree with Ellis. It's nice to get a lineman's perspective on this. And it leads into my next question here on the remainder of the offensive line. But I want to touch on what you said with the technique that I think most people overlook in the battle that happens in the trenches. It reminds me very much of why most people don't enjoy watching baseball, because there are so many subtle shifts that
Great
occur in the
example.
game that most people don't understand what's happening on defense in baseball, and it becomes boring to them because they're not into the little things that are occurring in shifting for every batter and every matchup. And I'm guessing
Yep.
that that's very similar in how the battle of the trenches go down. If you were ranking first to worst along our offensive line, obvious that Trent Williams is head and shoulders above the rest. How would you rank the remaining four if you're going best to worst?
Good question. Are we including Mike McGlinchey, or are we sticking with Tom Compton?
We'll stick with Tom Compton for now because that's who we're
Gotcha.
sticking with in the game.
Absolutely. So, I mean, honestly, you really could just go left to right, and I think that would actually stack up well. Lakin
That's what I
Tomlinson,
think.
Alex Mack, Brunskill, and Tom Compton. I think you can make the case that Alex Mack could be playing at a equal level, or maybe a little bit better than Lakin Tomlinson.
Mm.
But they are both performing at a high level, in my opinion.
And do you think Alex Mack has showed notable improvement from the beginning of the year to where we are now?
Immensely. And
Yes.
I think a lot of people, I talked about a little bit earlier, Kenny Clark and what he did to Alex Mack a couple times in that Green Bay game. I came away from that game tipping my cap to Kenny Clark and being like, okay, I had no idea you were this good. So
He was balling.
yeah, I put it into perception, like, I was looking through it from that type of lens, where I didn't think Alex Mack was necessarily playing bad. He just went up a guy who was very smart. Again, we talked about the game of the game. Both those two plays in that Green Bay game, he absolutely set up Alex Mack.
Mm.
Absolutely set up Alex Mack. And again, used Alex Mack's technique against him. And again, the games within the games, it can make you look real bad, but you can also be able to conceptualize that, well, that defensive lineman's really smart, and he understood that Alex Mack was trying to reach block him to the right, and he set him up to the right, and he countered inside, and the rest is history. And those are the games within the games that are always being played. So while Alex Mack will get got every here and there, I'm seeing why. It's because the guys he's going against get paid millions of dollars as well, and they're good at what they do. And again, you're getting, that's life as an offensive lineman. I liken it to playing cornerback.
Ooh.
Both these guys have to we're both backpedaling. We both have elite athletes running at our faces. Sometimes you're going to get beat in those scenarios. So, but when you look at the entire body of work, I mean, one of the reasons why this offensive line is performing at this level It's not because of Trent Williams. Trent Williams is a unicorn. He was great. He was great last year. He was great in 2020 as well. The
Yes.
reason why this offensive line unit is functioning is because of Alex Mack and because he's at
Amen to that.
center. Because when Brunskill was in, when Hornets Grossu was in, oh my God, it was a nightmare. And that was because there's so much that goes into diagnosing defenses, ensuring the rest of your O-line is on the same page. You're sliding protection the correct way. Daniel Brunskill talked about it. He's just like, I got thrown into the fire. Like, I didn't know. Like, I was trying to figure it out. Like, he never played center before. And it's just like he talked about it too just recently, I think on the Hidden Pearls podcast with George Kittle and his family. Brunskill was talking about when you go from tackle to guard to center, the error for, or the I guess the leash you have for mistakes, it drops down as the closer you move towards the center. So, and we talked about interior pressure is the easiest way to disrupt the play. That's along those same lines. So I think a lot of people see some of the mistakes that Alex Mack makes, but when we look at the entire body of work, we compare it to 2020, Alex Mack is having a phenomenal year.
Yeah, and that was a turnstile of a position. It's interesting. It seems we did a little bit to Daniel Brunskill what we did to Jimmy Ward early on in his career, right? Moving him around from position to position, trying to find the best use for the team. Meanwhile, sort of hurting the progression of the individual player. It took Jimmy a while to respond to that. Now, obviously, he's in his most comfortable position. He has indicated he wants to stay at safety and not play corner for another team, even if that offer had come out in free agency. Final question on the offensive line. When you look at Daniel Brunskill, is his more natural position at swing tackle? I mean, would he be a better fit there, or is he a true guard?
I think he's actually a natural tackle because he is a tight end. He was a tight end in college. He kind of got into the league at tight end. They quickly transitioned him to left tackle. He went to the AAF, played at tackle. And he talked about it actually just recently about, because he talks about how he has to gain weight constantly and the difficulty he has trying to gain weight, and you can see how that translates into when he faces stout, big body, thick interior defensive linemen when he's in one-on-one situations. Anything else, I would say Brunskill is absolutely good at. When it comes to pulling, he's good at it. When he comes to doing screens, like even some of the situations where he's seen where it looks like he's might have been out of place, I would actually put that towards whoever the ball carrier was. But in regards to the way Daniel Brunskill operates switches, all those kinds of things, he's really good, honestly. The only place he struggles the most is in one-on-one pass blocking situations with strong defensive tackles. That's when he runs into the most trouble. But other than that, again, body of work. Daniel Brunskill this year, again, I know what the narratives and the kind of overarching thought processes are, but Brunskill's been pretty dang good this year,
especially in run blocking. I mean, people overlook what he and Tom Compton have been able to do in the run blocking scheme. It's been pretty phenomenal for what are essentially two backups at the position. I wanted to ask this myself just as a follow-up to that, and Matthew Mears points it out, hoping that Brunskill would be able to move back to tackle and let Banks play. How critical of a move would that be if Aaron Banks could round into form and take over that right guard spot? Do you think that would solidify the right half of the line, to have Banks' weight therein at right guard, weight and strength, and then moving Brunskill out to right tackle? Do you see that as a positive move if the 49ers are able to make it?
I don't, because I think if that was the case, they would have done it by now.
Right.
I had the ability and the privilege to be at training camp, and
Very cool.
being a big offensive lineman guy. Anytime Aaron Banks was in, my eyes were on him, and I was watching exactly what he was doing, because based on what I saw on tape at Notre Dame, I thought Banks was going to walk in, and I'm a big Brunskill guy, admittedly, but I thought Banks was going to come in and just day one starter. Like, I thought that's what his tape looked like. And I didn't get the pick when they first made it I was a little like, that's just doesn't match what we typically like. There's an archetype for offensive linemen that the 49ers go after. And I was like,
Yeah.
that just doesn't match. And when I got into the tape, I was like, okay, I feel a lot better now. But once we got into training camp and we saw them move in from left guard to the right guard, you could see the game was just much faster for him and it wasn't slowing down. And even in the Jags game, when he got in, I think for 3 plays, you could still see the game's still fast for him.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing with offensive linemen is, although we see some come in and dominate right away, I also understand that it's one of the biggest transitions going from facing college defensive linemen to pro defensive linemen, because like we've talked about the technique, it's completely different worlds going from college to the NFL, playing in the trenches. So I'm still holding out hope for Banks, but I don't think that would be the best case scenario. I think Brunskill's playing good ball. It's just, the couple reps here or there that stand out. But overall, I just, based on what I've seen from Banks, he needs some time to marinate still.
That makes sense. We could be looking at a 2022 immersion. Yeah, when you take an interior offensive lineman that high in the second round, the fair expectation is that they're going to start from day one. You don't invest that type of draft capital unless you think that's going to be the end result. Well, I just want to make sure and check. We've just hit the hour mark. Are you okay to continue going for a few minutes, hit our last couple topics?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Let's get into the transition here, getting into our next topic, talking about the 49ers offense and finding a little bit more balance within the 49ers offense. The Niners tend to get a little bit one-dimensional. And what I mean is actually not the difference between run-pass ratio. What I mean is they tend to become hyper-focused on one or two players in each individual game and just seem to ignore everyone else. Up until recently, it had obviously been Elijah Mitchell and Deebo Samuel. Stop either one of them, and we struggled. Either one of them out for the game, we struggled. Easier said than done to stop them, but now we have the emergence of George Kittle, so giving me a little bit of hope. Like the last 2 games by George, lights out, and Brandon Ayuk is even shining through at this point. Brad, my question is, how important is it for the 49ers to continue to get these players involved in the offense going forward, especially if they're going to make any type of noise in the playoffs?
I think it's huge to continue to disperse the football, because I think what we know about Kyle Shanahan, his scheme, is that when defenses are guessing what he's doing, they're in trouble. But
Yes.
what we've seen this year is defense know exactly what he's doing. And that's been one of the most troubling things from watching some of the tape, especially, again, I keep referencing the Green Bay game. Green Bay knew exactly what we were doing in every sense of the word. I saw defensive players running to spots before the ball was even hiked. They knew exactly what was coming at them, and we saw the offense just really struggle as a result. And I think they've been kind of running into that a lot of the year. And we talked about the run game, they've kind of been evolving the style of running they're doing to, I think, fit their runners better, because we've talked about not having Mostert. But again, everything I think still has to be hinged off the run game. I think one of the big reasons why we're seeing Kittle have this explosion is we're finally seeing the counters off the run game, because what we're seeing is it looks like Kittle's just executing. He's about to go double to backer. He's about to reach step a defensive end. He's pulling like he's going to block like he's done all year. Here now, it feels like the defenses have fallen asleep to that. And so that's why he's been gashing people, because he's basically executing his run blocking technique and then turns into running a route concept or something, and they just hit him on the backside. And he, is the Yak King for a reason. So he just goes and does all the work after the catch, and he's hard to stop. And so now it's going to be interesting how teams are going to be keying on that. Now, how do we key on Deebo Samuel? Are we keeping him as a runner in the backfield? Because, to be honest, Debo right now is our really only true explosive running back. And that's no
Yes.
disrespect to Elijah Mitchell at all. And I just want
Right.
to make that clear. But Debo's the most explosive runner that we have. So it's going to be interesting now to see with the Debo Samuel, hopefully Elijah Mitchell, George Kittle, and Brandon Ayuk, who has taken leaps and bounds from what he was in the beginning of the year, to see now how they incorporate everything into a singular game plan. Because I agree, they have been very specific in targeting one person, whether it's Debo Samuel, now it's transferred to George Kittle.
Right.
Is it going to be Ayuk next? It's going to be really interesting to see, but hopefully it's them transitioning to a more well-rounded attack where teams again get back to just not knowing what's coming.
Yeah, that's the key, not knowing, because you have seen the past two games, the 49ers offense really stagnate in the second half. And you're talking about certainly a skilled defensive coordinator and head coach in Seattle. And you just wonder if your entire game plan is reliant upon one or two stars, those halftime adjustments become much easier, right? You're only attempting to take away one or two weapons. And as you head into the playoffs, these game plans become so much more team specific. It's no longer just, hey, we're operating our base and we'll bring in a little bit of additional game planning for these teams as we match up week to week. No, it becomes entirely focused on how you match up against that opponent and maximizing those mismatches that occur. And if the 49ers can build out a robust offense that is reliant upon a multitude of stars, now you're talking about something that is so much harder to stop. It's why I continue to hope that we will see 4 to 6 snaps develop for Trey Lance, just in the idea that it gives opposing defenses something extra that they have to game plan for, an additional look that can throw them off and can provide a couple of chunk plays. Because if there's something that the 49ers do lack, it is the ability to hit the large gains, to hit the chunk plays on a consistent basis, if they're not yak yards, right? I mean, certainly getting the ball to Kittle or Debo in space can produce a 60-yard touchdown at any point in the game. Debo Samuel around the edge, I just can't understand how he's so fast. It's a deceptive speed. When I saw that around the edge following Tom Compton to glory against the Bengals, I couldn't believe he made it. The defender had a phenomenal angle on him, and Debo smoked the guy. His 0 to 60 is really something else, and it does provide something that I think Elijah Mitchell is missing there. Elijah has that more top-end high speed that hasn't produced a home run hit really to this point so far, but does allow him to hit some of those gaps that you would have been reliant on Raheem Mostert to hit. He's much closer to the 4.3 speed, but it doesn't seem like he has quite that burst to be able to get around the edges, but Debo brings that. So if they can just continue to spread it out, I believe this offense can resemble that 2016 Falcons offense that is the high watermark for Kyle Shanahan and what he brings to the table when he has a fully functioning arsenal.
Absolutely. And I also think we could see a little bit more counter game against kind of the 3-4 scheme. Again, you're gonna have a nose tackle, two defensive ends over the guards, essentially outside shade the guards in the 3 tech, and then you have your standing up outside linebackers. I think it sets it up pretty well to really get that counter game going. You know how they've been. One of the things, kind of just to touch on Brunskill, there's a big reason why Brunskill is the pulling offensive lineman to the left a lot more than Laken Tomlinson. It's just because Brunskill's a better puller. I think Laken struggles sometimes out in space a little bit, so they really don't pull Laken too much, maybe once or twice a game. But Brunskill, they're pulling him nonstop to that left side. So I can imagine that might be one of their bread and butters going into this game, trying to utilize, whether it's pulling Kittle, pulling Juice, pulling Jeff Wilson. We've seen them pull guys like Jawan Jennings in tandem with Brunskill to that left side. Again, having Trent and Laken just completely demolish the defensive line by down blocking. I think there's an opportunity there for them to exploit kind of that 3-4 defense with that counter game. So it's going to be interesting to see. But again, if they can do that with the baseline, get chunk yardage out of that, then the counters to Kittle, then to Ayuk, and then to Debo, even Jawan Jennings, all that stuff opens up. So I'm really excited to see how that works out. But to one of your other points, I would also love to see a couple more shots get taken down the field.
Yes.
Um,
Amen.
that are there and that are schemed open and just aren't taken. But we kind of understand probably along the lines of what's
There's
going
some
on there.
limitations that are preventing the 49ers from taking those shots. You certainly saw what happened. The shot to Travis Benjamin was
Yes.
mildly underthrown there. That should have been a home run ball.
Yes, and there was another one that I actually ran across on tape where you got Debo running up the seam wide open, completely dusted the guy on him, and Jimmy just didn't see it. However, Jimmy made some good throws in that game.
Absolutely.
Specifically, the deep shots where they are schemed open and or available, just not taken.
Yeah, I think Debo is a far better deep threat than he gets credit for because of those limitations that currently exist within the 49ers offense. All right, getting into this thing from the end. By the way, just touching on, I love what Jawan Jennings is bringing to the field. I love the mental outlook he has on the game. I love what he's doing in run blocking. I love how he gets in defenders' heads. When he had that guy swinging on him and he was just laughing and smiling, that is exactly the mindset you need for a run-first identity football team like the 49ers. That is inspirational to me. Let's get specific about this one against Atlanta. Just some general thoughts on how you see this one unfolding, and if you're comfortable with it, a score prediction. I've not made my own score prediction yet this week, but depending on yours, I may just feel inspired and spit it out right here.
God, there's so many ranges of outcomes when I look at this game. Like, I can see a game where it's maybe not a high scoring game. Both teams are kind of flat on offense. Obviously, we've talked about some of the limitations with the Falcons. Obviously, we understand that there are times where the 49ers offense can be a little turnover prone.
Yes.
So it's going to be really imperative to see which team shows up. Obviously, if the team that we think is going to show up, I would imagine it's probably going to be something like a 27-21 or something like in that range where they're going to be able to score points. I would imagine with some of the limitations on the offense or on the defensive side, they'll probably sneak in a touchdown here or there. They'll be able to sneak one in. But it could also be a situation where it's just a complete blowout. It could be a situation where it's like a 7 to, I don't know, something in the 30s. It could be. So I just look at it. There's a multiple ranges of outcomes, and I'll admittedly not a huge prediction guy. But I would probably say it's going to be, I would hope it would be in a game where it's a two score type game for the 49ers. But again, we just got done talking about all the reasons why it might not be that. So it's one of those games. It's going to be which team decides to show up.
Yeah, I agree that this could go so many different directions. If the 49ers come out flat and you've got the Cardinals traveling cross country, you could see a low scoring one. You could see the 49ers coming out flat and the Falcons jumping. It's a bird, same difference.
Yeah, same difference.
You could see the Falcons jumping out all over the 49ers and then a close one finishing up in that way. And you could see the roster strength being the core of it, and the 49ers truly being a better and deeper team than Atlanta and taking control of it as they managed to do to so many teams in 2019, thinking specifically about that Tampa Bay game or the Cincinnati game from 2019 where they dominated teams with time of possession, running the ball, controlling the ball, playing smart, turnover-free football, and just dominating. I see it as setting up to be a tough one for the 49ers. Like I said, I hadn't picked an official score coming into it, but as I look at the scores going down, as I listen to your reasoning there, as I go through it, I think the 49ers should win by 2 scores, but I don't think they will. I think Atlanta will play tough. I think San Francisco will certainly come out and have that questionable start coming back off of the East Coast. So I'm going to go with several field goals in this one, reasonably high scoring, but I think San Francisco probably ends up taking this one 27-20 is going to be my official pick there. Well, I mean, we got folks coming in, enjoying the show. Great comments going on in the chat. Sorry we didn't get to more of them. Tried to get them up as we were talking. Nick was glad that we had a refreshing show that's not completely bogged down with quarterback talk. No, we have other exciting things to talk about with the San Francisco 49ers in this upcoming matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. And there was a random super chat that came in earlier that seemed to just be a donation, but I got to get it on the screen because you pay your money, you get your donation up there. Man, it is a long way scrolling back in the comments to try and find that thing. Here we go. Delay.
I always find it interesting when you skip a super chat because, like, you see them come up and there's like, someone will be like, "Hey, you missed my super chat." I'm like, "How did I miss your super chat?"
How did I? It refreshed and I missed it. Dave Owens came in and announced that Grant Cohn was on, and therefore he needed to leave the chat, and it was time to go. But he felt so bad about leaving that he left a donation in his stead. So, Dave, I appreciate that. Sorry you had to go. I'm sure Grant had some great content, but I don't know if it went as in-depth as we did here. I thought this was fantastic. Hey, I appreciate everybody being here. If you do not follow Brad, all of the information to do so, the Twitter handle, the YouTube page is down below in the description of this video. If you enjoy the content today, go follow his content over there. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button and subscribe button on your way out. It greatly helps content creators like myself and Brad, and I know I absolutely appreciate it. Brad, it was an absolute pleasure having you on here today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Rob, man, I really appreciate it. This is, our first time speaking, and I think it was great. Good job. This is awesome, man. Thank you for having me.
Great vibe, great content. I appreciate you being here. Just a reminder that for the sneakerheads, members of the channel, there will be a video call-in show, the inaugural video call-in show tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The video will be viewable for everyone. The link will be limited to members of the sneakerhead community, and that link will be on the sneakerhead community tab of my YouTube page. Again, awesome content. Brad, great stuff. Thank you for the insight. We will be back later. Until then, thank you, 49er faithful. Cheers to you.